Imagine living in a world where music was still traditional, records were simple, and youth culture was virtually non-existent. Then, suddenly, a band from Liverpool bursts in and changes everything. The Beatles weren't just a band, they were a revolution that changed music and culture forever. How did they do it? And how did they become the voice that inspired a whole generation? Follow along on this exciting journey to discover how the Beatles changed the world. Before the Beatles emerged in the mid-1960s, rock and roll was already at the center of the cultural conversation, but their rise changed the game of music and popular culture. The Beatles pushed the boundaries of rock and roll, changed how music was produced in the 1960s, and gave birth to youth culture. The changing role of the recording studio. Before the Beatles rose to cultural dominance in the 1960s, all music was recorded on 2 tracks. Think, bits of tape going into a tape recorder. The Beatles began experimenting with the new 4-track recording with their 1963 single, I Want to Hold Your Hand. This ushered in a new style of multi-track recording, one where sounds could be layered, encouraging experimentation and avant-garde sounds. The Beatles pushed the boundaries even further with their studio album Abbey Road, where they used a new type of multi-track recording machine. As Paul McCartney described the group's recording process, we'd say, try it with us. If it sounds bad, well, we'll lose it. But it might sound good. We were always pushing forward, higher, farther, longer, more, different. The Beatles also used recording sessions as an opportunity to experiment. When they first started recording, the industry standard was for groups to come into the studio to record an album as a performance. The group would record entire songs until the engineer was satisfied with the material, and the entire album would be recorded in a few hours. But the Beatles used their weeks in the studio to create songs from scratch. They explored the limits of technology by splicing tapes together, layering them, and playing them backwards through instruments, creating a new sound that did not replicate their live performances. A Day in the Life by the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band is most famous for its use of these new techniques. The song features a 40-piece orchestra and an unnervingly continuous piano chord. The song's famous final piano note lasts for over 40 seconds, creating a strange, continuous effect. This was achieved through multiple layers of piano and studio tricks, contributing to the overall mystique of the song. By the early 1960s, rock music had lost its foothold in popular culture as its original stars moved away from the genre. Elvis was in the army, Buddy Holly had died, and Little Richard was pursuing a career in gospel music. While the Beatles pushed the boundaries of their recording technology, they also changed what rock music was, breathing new life into a genre that was nearing obsolescence. Music journalist Mark Kemp credits the Beatles with diversifying rock and pop, venturing into genres such as world music, psychedelia, avant-garde pop, and electronica. Along with the Byrds, the Beatles are credited with starting the popularity of the staccato sound associated with staccato pop, which appealed to a new bohemian audience previously interested in jazz and folk. George Harrison's use of a Rickenbacker 360-12 guitar during the recording of A Hard Day's Night played a pivotal role in popularizing the guitar, and its distinctive sound became so prominent that British magazine Melody Maker called it the Beatles' secret weapon. In 1964, a meeting between the Beatles and folk musician Bob Dylan led to a mutual exchange of musical elements, influencing both parties' genres. This collaboration left a lasting mark on the emerging folk rock movement of the mid-1960s. Music historian Andrew Grant Jackson highlights the importance of Harrison's 12-string guitar on A Hard Day's Night as the catalyst for the beginning of the folk rock sound. Throughout their rise to stardom, the Beatles continually pushed the boundaries of rock and roll and then brought the genre with them, a new popular culture. The rise of the Beatles was the first time that popular culture coalesced around what young people cared about. Before then, youth had not been seen as a mass of consumers or something to be marketed. In the 1960s, the baby boomers, who were then in their teens, had enough members, shared attitudes, and financial means to be seen as a single category, a collective consciousness. For the youth of the 1960s, the Beatles' music and persona embodied a spirit of rebellion and liberation. Their lyrics often explored themes of individuality, love, and freedom, which resonated with the aspirations and frustrations of youth. The band's rejection of conformity and their embrace of a more open and expressive lifestyle became emblematic of the counterculture movement. Furthermore, the Beatles' rejection of traditional norms extended to an anti-establishment stance. This orientation resonated with the anti-authoritarian sentiments of 1960s youth who were questioning societal norms, political authority, and the conservative values of the previous generation. The band's distinctive fashion sense, characterized by their loose hair, collarless suits, and colorful clothing, became a style statement for young people. The Beatles' influence on fashion extended beyond clothing to hairstyles, influencing a generation to adopt a more minimalist and individualistic approach to personal style. The Beatles were outspoken about social and cultural issues, from advocating for peace to rejecting apartheid. Their engagement with these issues in their music and public statements encouraged a sense of social awareness among their young audience, inspiring many to become more politically and socially active. The Beatles' popularity transcended national boundaries, contributing to the globalization of youth culture. Their music and image became symbols of a shared experience for young people around the world, fostering a sense of unity and connectedness among the global youth community. Overall, the Beatles were more than just a musical phenomenon. They were cultural icons who spoke to the aspirations and values of the youth of the 1960s. The Beatles changed the boundaries of rock and roll, how music was made in the 1960s, and galvanized an entire generation, creating waves of change for decades to come. From the studio to the stage, from songs to cultural revolution, the Beatles weren't just musicians, they were true pioneers of change. Their influence is still evident today, and their songs live on through generations. But the question is, could another band emerge that could make the same impact? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to support us with a like and subscribe to the channel so we can continue to provide more exciting musical stories.